It started with a simple idea, a practical solution to a very real problem. The US government needed to protect its crops, and someone, somewhere, had a plan. Release thousands of toads, let nature do the work, clean, simple, cheap. It made perfect sense on paper, but within a few years, farmers were terrified, wildlife officials were scrambling, and the animals they brought in to solve the problem had become the problem. This isn't a story about a mistake made in some remote jungle. This happened here, on American soil, in the fields, the backyards, the wetlands of states people actually live in. And the worst part? The scientists knew there were risks. They released the toads anyway. What happened next took decades to fully understand, and even now, the damage isn't over. This is the real story of one of the most well-intentioned ecological decisions in American history, and how it quietly turned into one of the most catastrophic. The year was 1935, and America had a serious problem. The sugarcane fields of Hawaii were being destroyed, not by drought, not by flooding, by beetles. Two specific species, the sugarcane beetle and the gray sugarcane beetle, were tearing through crops at a scale that was bleeding the industry dry. Farmers were losing money every single season. The agriculture industry was desperate, so the government turned to science. A team of officials and agricultural researchers made a decision that seemed at the time almost brilliant. They looked at a large, aggressive toad native to Central and South America, the cane toad, Rhinella marina. This thing was a natural predator. It ate insects, lots of them. It was tough, adaptable, and reproduced fast. In Puerto Rico, it had reportedly helped control certain pests. The results looked promising. So, in August 1935, around 102 cane toads were imported to Hawaii, bred in captivity, multiplied rapidly, and then approximately 2,400 toads were released directly into the sugarcane fields. The plan felt solid. The logic was sound. Nature would take care of the rest. But there was one detail the researchers underestimated. One quiet biological fact that would change everything. The beetles that were destroying the crops. They lived and fed at the top of the sugarcane stalks, high up, out of reach. And cane toads? They don't climb. The toads never touched the beetles. Not once. But they were already in the fields, already breeding, already spreading. And they had to eat something. When a cane toad is hungry, it doesn't wait. It eats whatever fits in its mouth. Insects, small lizards, bird eggs, even small native frogs that had lived in Hawaii for centuries. The toads began moving, not just through the sugarcane fields, through everything. Wetlands, grasslands, backyards, places no one planned for them to go. And they reproduced at a terrifying rate. A single female cane toad can lay up to 3,000 eggs in one season. One season. The 2,400 toads that were released in 1935 became tens of thousands within just a few years. Local wildlife started disappearing quietly. Native bird populations dropped in certain areas. Small reptiles that had no natural defense against the toads began vanishing. But here's what made it worse. The cane toad isn't just an aggressive eater, it's poisonous. Behind its eyes, it carries large parotoid glands, filled with a toxic milky substance called bufotoxin. Any animal that tried to prey on the toads paid the price. Dogs that wandered near the fields came back foaming at the mouth. Farmers reported finding dead hawks near the toad zones. Even snakes that attacked the toads were killed by the poison. The toad had no natural predator in Hawaii. Nothing could stop it. Nothing wanted to get close enough to try. Officials began receiving reports from across the islands. The toad wasn't staying in the fields. It was moving toward populated areas. And then, in the early 1950s, someone made a decision that would take this crisis and multiply it across an entire continent. Australia was watching. Agricultural officials there had been tracking the Hawaii experiment closely. They had their own beetle problem. The French's beetle and the greyback cane beetle were destroying Queensland's sugarcane industry. The same crop, the same pest, the same pressure, and they thought they had found the same solution. In June 1935, just months after Hawaii's release, 101 cane toads were shipped to Queensland, Australia, bred, multiplied, released. About 2,400 toads again, almost identical to Hawaii's plan, almost identical numbers. But Australia was not Hawaii. Hawaii is an island, contained, surrounded by ocean. Australia is a continent. 3 million square miles of open land, connected ecosystems stretching thousands of miles in every direction. There was nowhere the toad couldn't go, and go it did. By the 1940s, cane toads had spread beyond Queensland. By the 1960s, they were pushing into New South Wales. By the 1980s, Northern Territory rangers were filing urgent reports. The toad was moving west at a rate of roughly 40 to 60 kilometers per year. Scientists tracked them with growing alarm. But what disturbed researchers most wasn't just the speed. It was what was happening to Australia's native wildlife along the path. The quoll, a small, spotted, carnivorous marsupial, ancient, native, irreplaceable. It had survived ice ages, it had survived droughts, but it had never encountered anything like the cane toad. Quoll populations began collapsing in areas where toads arrived, not because the toads hunted them, but because the quolls hunted the toads, and the poison did the rest. Researchers began finding dead quolls across the Northern Territory, dozens, then hundreds. And that's when one scientist looked at the data and said something that stopped the entire room cold. The scientist's name was Rick Shine, a professor of biology at the University of Sydney. He had spent years studying reptiles and amphibians across Australia, and what he found in the data was not just alarming, it was irreversible. He presented his findings simply, no dramatic language, no exaggeration, just numbers. In regions where cane toads had arrived, native predator populations had dropped by up to 90%, not 10, not 30, 90. The freshwater crocodile, the goanna lizard, the northern quoll, all collapsing in toad zones. And the toad population itself? Estimated at over 200 million across Australia by the early 2000s. 200 million animals, from 2,400 original releases. The room was silent, because everyone understood what that number meant. This wasn't a pest problem anymore. This was an ecological unraveling. Entire food chains were being restructured, not gradually, rapidly. Predators that kept other species in check were disappearing, and the species they once controlled were now surging unchecked. The balance that had existed for thousands of years was being rewritten in real time. Government officials launched emergency response programs. Volunteers were trained to collect and euthanize toads by hand. Biological research teams tested chemical deterrents. None of it was fast enough, because while they were planning, the toads kept moving. And then researchers discovered something about the toads themselves, something biological, something that no one had predicted in 1935, something that suggested the toads weren't just spreading, they were evolving faster than any amphibian on record. Toads at the front of the invasion were changing, not in behavior, not in diet, in their bodies. Researchers measured leg length across toad populations. The toads leading the spread had legs that were measurably longer than those behind them. Longer legs meant faster movement. Faster movement meant reaching new territory first. Reaching new territory first meant reproducing there first. Evolution was selecting for speed. In just 70 years, the cane toad had begun physically redesigning itself to spread faster. That had never been documented at that speed in any amphibian species before. Rick Shine's team published the findings. The scientific community took notice, but the public response was something no researcher expected. Ordinary Australians were furious, not at the toads, at the decision made in 1935, a decision made by officials who were trying to help, who genuinely believed they had the right answer. And that is perhaps the most unsettling part of this entire story. No one acted with bad intentions, no one was reckless or corrupt. They looked at a problem. They found what seemed like a solution, and they acted. But ecosystems don't forgive good intentions. Nature doesn't care why you made the decision. It only responds to what you did. Today, over 200 million cane toads occupy Australian land. Control efforts continue across multiple states. Some native species have begun showing early signs of behavioral adaptation, but the toad is still moving, still evolving, still spreading, and somewhere right now, another well-meaning solution to another real problem is being planned. The only question is, what will it unleash? If this story made you think twice about how fragile ecosystems really are, you are exactly who this channel is made for. Subscribe so you never miss the next story, because trust us, the next one is just as real.